Thanks for staying with us for this O'Reilly Factor special. I'm Greg Gutfeld in for Bill O'Reilly. And in the Factor follow-up segment tonight, voter fraud in Kansas this week. Victor David Garcia Bebic, a Peruvian national, pled guilty to illegally voting 3 times. He did it in a 2012 special election, plus the general elections of 2012 and 2014. It was Kansas's first conviction of a non-citizen voter fraud since giving authority to its Secretary of State to prosecute the crime. Joining us now with more from Topeka, the Secretary of State of Kansas, Chris Kobach, who oversaw the prosecution of this case. So, Mr. Kobach, it's your first conviction of a non-citizen voter fraud. How big a problem is this? Is this like the tip of the iceberg, or is it just a tip?
It is the tip of the iceberg. You know, Greg, these cases are really hard to discover, and so the cases that get prosecuted are just a tiny percentage of the total size of the problem. Look, take this guy's case, for example. The way we discovered this was he registered to vote back in 2011. We didn't know that he was an alien at the time. And then in 2017, he naturalized, and at the naturalization ceremony, a nice person from the Sedgwick County Election Office said, "Hey, would you like to register to vote?" And he filled out another registration card. They went back to the office, typed in his information, and said, "Hey, this guy's been registered for almost 6 years, and he's been voting." And so we wouldn't have discovered it unless he had registered that second time. And then, of course, we brought the prosecution. But in that same county, we know of 24 other individuals who either registered as aliens or attempted to. But we didn't discover it in time before the statute of limitations ran, so we can't prosecute them. And those are just the ones we found. We're talking about many times that number we haven't found. Is
this more like a symbolic prosecution, like when they used to go after people for pirating music? You know, they find some woman who, like, lifted 10 Pearl Jam songs, and they, you know, to give a message to everybody else?
No, it's really not. You know, this is, if we have more cases of non-citizens voting where we actually discover it within 5 years of the crime,
right,
then we will prosecute them. And that's the strange thing about this particular crime. There's some kinds of voter fraud we can discover pretty easily, like when someone votes in 2 different states. We can compare databases and figure that out. But when non-citizens voting, you can't look at the voter rolls of your state and say, oh, yeah, there's a citizen, that's a non-citizen. There's nothing in the record that says that. So we only find out when something unusual happens, like the guy registers a second time after naturalizing. Or another example, maybe somebody says on a jury form, oh, I don't want to serve on that jury, I'm a non-citizen. And then we get a clue that way. So it's really hard to get these cases in time to prosecute them.
Now, the Republican chairman of the U.S. Election Assistance Commission says there's no epidemic of voter fraud. You disagree. What are you seeing that he doesn't see?
Well, what I see is in what we're looking at in Kansas, where we are going after certain forms of voter fraud, you can get a sense of the size of the problem. And we're in litigation right now against the ACLU. They want us to stop requiring people to provide proof of citizenship, which is a reform we introduced in 2013. So we had an outside expert come in and do some sampling of our voter rolls. And he estimates that the total number of non-citizens, aliens on our voter rolls, is in the thousands, maybe as high as 18,000. So it's a big problem, and we literally only see that very, very tip of the iceberg, and sometimes we can prosecute.
You know, the sentence, what do you think of the guy, the sentence? I think he got non-supervised probation, and he had to pay a fine of $5,000. What do you think of that kind of sentencing?
You know, I think that's appropriate, because I wanted, when we gained this prosecutorial authority, I want it to be a heavy fine, not like $200, but $5,000, so that people will think twice when they say, hey, look, if you get caught committing voter fraud in Kansas, there's going to be a heavy fine. I don't think people necessarily need to spend time in jail, but it's got to hit them pretty hard in the pocketbook.
I would hate to go to jail for that. You know, if somebody comes up to you and says, what are you in for? It's like the guy next to you is kidnapping and assault, and you're like, you know, I voted illegally in a local election, and it's like, steer clear of this guy. You know, he's trouble. All right.
It could be rough.
Yeah. Secretary Kobach, thank you so much.